Storyline.
I worked at a bar in Fort Worth, Texas, on Houston Street, close to the convention center. I was in my mid-20s and struggling to find work at the time, but this place was very quick to hire both me and my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. We started at the bar as bartenders, but my wife quit shortly after because the place was dead. It just didn't get very many customers, and it was suspicious that they let us work the bar with no prior experience. The bar had a small hallway kitchen in the back that led to a small office where we kept the safe. We had a cook named Ronnie who worked back there, but bolted the second his shift would end around 10 p.m. I made a joke with him one evening about the lack of guests being because the place was haunted. Ronnie was an older guy who had grown up hard and served time in prison. He was tough and rough around the edges, and when I said that, the joking stopped. He looked at me with an intensity in his eyes that made me uneasy. He told me there was something in the building, and there was a reason he didn't stay late. He said it was the spirit of a cowboy. With how serious he was, I was not about to question him. I didn't want to get on his bad side. I played along, but in my mind, I thought either he was a little out of touch or just messing with me. An older woman named Kathy I worked the bar with told me that the spirit inhabited the place and that she had seen him, but come on, a cowboy ghost? Honestly, at this point, I thought maybe they were just messing with me being the new guy and all. A few days later, one of our shift leads who closed the bar quit unexpectedly after a night shift. I figured it was due to the business not being so hot. Still, it was kind of strange. The bar manager promoted me to shift lead, and I was told I'd be closing the bar the following week. I barely got this job, and now I was a shift leader. I couldn't believe it. I'd be able to take that experience there and apply to another bar that made some real money after a while, I thought. This all changed when I worked that closing shift. I came in the evening of the day I would be shift lead and began helping Kathy with the bar. That night, we had our one other cook, Sam, working. He was a quiet guy who was a combat veteran and had served a long stint in prison. He, like Ronnie, would also leave the bar the second the clock hit 10 p.m. It was just us three that night. Sam would be leaving at 10 p.m. and Kathy would be leaving at 11 p.m. I would work until 2 a.m. and close the bar down. The shift was dead for hours. We had a few people here and there, but most of the time was spent in the alley out back smoking cigarettes with Kathy and Sam. The night crawled on, but at roughly 9 p.m., the place was flooded with people from a fitness convention that had just let out down the street. It was hectic, lots of large parties. It was the busiest I'd ever seen the place. Right at 10 p.m., Sam left out the back as usual. Now it was just alcohol sales. People got rowdy and things got messy. At 11 p.m., Kathy was preparing to leave, but I begged her to help me get these people served, as I couldn't handle it all alone. She reluctantly agreed, and at 12 a.m., things began to die down. I thanked her for her help. Before she left, she looked at me and wished me luck closing. The way she said it seemed off. That's the best way I can think to put it. At roughly 12:30 a.m., the last of the people from the convention had left. The bar was absolutely trashed, though. There was no way in hell I could clean the entire place, I thought, but it had to be done. I began to clean the bar. Now this bar, when you walk in, has rows of TVs on both sides. I turned them up to have some comfort, as I felt a little uneasy working alone, but while I was cleaning the tables, they all suddenly muted. We had one remote that would work for every TV, but you would have to hit the mute button, aiming at the TVs one by one. They all just cut out. As soon as they did, I heard something fall in the kitchen. I'd be lying if I said this did not scare the crap out of me. I ran back to the kitchen and didn't see anything out of place. I went back to the TVs to figure out what was going on with them, but couldn't find an explanation. I went and got the remote from the bar and started unmuting the TVs, one by one. I continued to clean. By roughly 1 in the morning, I realized there was no way I was going to have the place clean by closing. It would take until 3 in the morning, at the earliest. I was a little creeped out by what had happened earlier, so I did not like this one bit, and I began to become more and more uneasy. I was sweeping at this point when I heard a thunderous crash of dishes in the kitchen. I got angry, as I knew this would mean more work, and threw the broom down. Also, it was creepy. I went back to the kitchen to investigate, and nothing. There was nothing out of place. I felt like I was being watched, and I looked down the long hall of the kitchen area to the small office with the safe. Something just felt off about that room. I went back to sweeping, and I swept as fast as I could. But the TVs all muted themselves at the same time again. I couldn't believe it. My heart was racing. I decided I would turn off the TVs, as that would be better than them muting themselves. After I turned off the TVs, I was really starting to get freaked out with how quiet it was. So I called Kathy, hoping she'd answer. I just wanted anyone in the bar with me at this point. I'd have paid her to stay with me. I figured I'd call her and just tell her the place was still a wreck and I needed some more help. I was hopeful when she answered, but she said she couldn't, as she was already home and it was late. She was obviously annoyed, and I didn't tell her much about what was happening, as I was kind of embarrassed and thought it might just be me scaring myself. I felt bad even asking her. In a really stupid moment of desperation, I ran outside and asked a homeless man if he'd come in and just sit in one of the booths while I closed. I'd give him as much soda and water as he wanted and turn on one of the TVs for him. He was a sketchy looking guy and looked at me like I was from another planet, but he agreed and came in. He said he wanted a Coke. I got him one. I'm now cleaning as fast as I possibly can. But then this guy started screaming at the top of his lungs at the TV. At this point, I'm terrified, and I realize how stupid it was to do this. I shouted from the bar for him to quiet down, and he did. Right after that, he got out of the booth and went into the bathroom. A while has gone by, and I need to clean the bathroom, so I go to open the door. But when I do, I see this man spinning around in a circle, peeing everywhere, all over the floor. I regret saying this, but I had completely lost any composure. My fear had turned to anger. I started screaming at him, yelling and cursing, telling him to get out. He hesitated, but I just kept yelling at him to leave, and he did. It's now after 2 a.m., and I'm cleaning the bathrooms. I hear a bang in the kitchen every now and again, but just ignore it and focus on cleaning and leaving the place as quickly as possible. It is taking every fiber of my being to not just leave the place. I needed this job, though. Finally, I'm at the register behind the bar, and it's time to do the money. I pulled out the binder from below the register that had closing procedure steps for cash handling. I'm taking deep breaths and trying to focus on the words when I'm so relieved to hear Kathy laughing out in the back alley. I hear the door in the back swing open and slam shut. I was so happy Kathy had decided to come back up to the bar. Maybe she had forgotten something. Maybe she had come because she heard how scared I was over the phone. She said something in the kitchen, but I couldn't quite make out what it was. I called out to her, but I heard nothing in response. I put the closing procedure binder down and go back to see what she said, and to thank her for coming back up to the bar.
The door in the kitchen is locked though.
No one is back there, and it is now eerily quiet again. I'm starting to panic. I decided I would speed up the cash handling and just leave. I go back to the binder in front of the register when I hear a woman's voice in the back hall again. I didn't know what she was saying, but I called out asking if it was Kathy messing with me. Silence. I go back to the binder and feel a tingling on my left side. I'm being watched. This is a little embarrassing, but I began to cry. I had never been so scared, but I continued following the procedures while I was not daring to turn to my left. But then it happened. My name was shouted by a woman to my left. It was clear as day. At this point, I was sure it had to be Kathy. It was her voice. Boy, she sure got me. I turned to my left, and no one is there. I call out one more time for Kathy. Silence. I threw the procedure binder down as hard as I could and sprinted to the front door, fumbling to unlock it. At this point, I'm shaking uncontrollably, and I couldn't quite catch my breath. I opened the door and tried to breathe, standing in the doorway. I pulled out my phone thinking I'd call 911. I don't know what good it would have done, but I wasn't thinking straight. My phone was dead. I notice across the street there's a group of men walking, hollering at each other playfully. I called out to them and asked if I could use one of their phones to call the police. They told me they were off-duty police officers and ran over. There were 4 of them. The men asked me what was going on. I told them everything. They asked if I was on something, and I told them I wasn't. They offered to clear the building for me. Something didn't feel right about this, but I let them in. They quickly look around and make their way to the back. All 4 of them were now in the kitchen. One of them waved for me to come back there. They said that they had believed the building was clear, but pointed at the safe down the long hall and said they didn't check in there. They said if I went down there, they'd come with me to check it. Now I'm worried. I'm going to get robbed. I told them it was not necessary. One of them was persistent, though. Eventually, one of the other guys looked at him and quietly shook his head. They didn't say anything after that. They just left. I locked the door behind them, and now I finally decided I've had enough of this hellish night. I grab all the money from the register area and run back down the hall to the safe. I decide I'm not going to count it. I'm just going to dump it in the room, lock the door, and leave. I'd turn in my key the next day and quit. Well, as I lock the door to the small office room, I hear a loud thud of heavy shoes behind me on the ground walking toward me. They started down the hall, and I could feel whatever it was staring at me. I turned around,
and no one was there.
I don't remember what I yelled, but it was vulgar and directed at whatever entity was toying with me. There was a small, eerie silence, and then the biggest pot hanging in the kitchen on my right falls to the ground with a massive clang. My heart had more than dropped. It had completely fallen out of my body. I was hollow and completely terrified. The impact shattered the silence and any bit of courage I had left in me. There has never been a time before or after that moment that I have been more afraid. It was total despair. I felt this thing was about to ramp up whatever it was doing, and I did not want to be there to find out what that would entail. I ran out of the building, locked the door, fumbled the keys to get into my car, but eventually did. I got in and sped home. The next day I went up to the bar to quit. I didn't bother explaining what had happened, as I was in shock and began to question my own sanity. I've seen multiple mental health professionals since then, had an MRI, and tried to find any rational explanation I could for that night. I still cannot. The next day I went up to turn in my keys, and I quit. Shortly after that, I decided to have a drink at another bar down the street. That's all I remember from that day. I woke up 8 hours later in an ambulance, miles away from the city. I have no idea how I got there. There's probably an easier explanation for that bit, though. Anyways, that's my paranormal experience.
What would you have done?
Story 2.
My grandpa was known to be musically inclined. He could play anything on the piano, guitar, and the harmonica. He loved the blues. He was one for tall tales, and told me he had played with Stevie Ray Vaughan and B.B. King. I don't know if I believed him, but his musical chops were almost good enough to believe it. When I was very young, maybe 5, he gifted me a harmonica. No matter how hard I tried, I never did seem to get any better at it, but he made it look so easy when he played it. Regardless, I cherished that harmonica and held on to it for years. It really meant something to me. One day, during summer break, I had my best friend over at my parents' house. We were messing around in the backyard play fighting. We come up with wrestler names and all of that, kid stuff. I had a little brother who always wanted in on whatever we were doing. He had come out into the backyard and tried to join, but there had been a previous time where he had been kicked in the face during one of the pretend wrestling matches, and I had gotten into serious trouble for my mom. I told him he couldn't play with us, and was probably mean to him, considering I was a little punk kid. My little brother had an issue with rage though, so if I told him he couldn't do something, there might be an explosive outburst. Not today though. After telling him he couldn't play, he simply went back into the house. Cool, I thought. That was easy. I continued roughhousing with my friend. A little while goes by, and my little brother comes back out into the yard holding something in his hand. I stop playing with my friend and look at him. My brother had my harmonica in his hand. My precious harmonica. He knew I cherished it. He said, "Fine, if I can't play, you can't have this." He ran to the tallest fence that connected to our backyard and tossed the harmonica over it. I was enraged and began yelling at him. After an immature screaming match filled with all manner of curses, my buddy tells me we should just hop the fence and go get the harmonica. Here's where things start to take a turn. You see, the fence connected to our backyard was not a normal fence. This thing was really tall. It concealed any view of our neighbor's backyard. That's not necessarily creepy or anything, but our neighbor was very reclusive, so much so that he had even boarded up a lot of his back windows from the inside. It was a 2-story house, so we were able to see those top windows from the backyard. Thinking back, that's pretty damn strange, but we were just dumb kids. After failing to scale the fence, my friend suggested we leave the yard, wrap around down the street, and just walk into his backyard. I did not like this idea, but I agreed to do this as I really wanted my harmonica back. My friend and I walked around the street to the front of this house. I noticed other windows were boarded up too, mainly on the second floor. The backyard gate was just to the left of the front entrance of the house, and in plain sight, we heard strange music coming from within the home. It must have been pretty loud to have heard it so well. Okay, my friend says, let's sneak in and get it. I was nervous about this. Something didn't feel right. I told him we should ask the guy who lives there if we can go into his backyard before attempting to retrieve the harmonica, remembering that one summer when we were ding-dong ditching, a man had come outside with a shotgun yelling at us. I did not want something like that to ever happen again. I told my friend we would try the front door first, and if no one answered, we would go through the gate. We approached the door and I rang the doorbell. Nothing. I knocked. Nothing. My friend looked at me to confirm that we would now be trying the yard. I began to turn around, but then something caught my eye. I saw movement in one of the first floor windows that had not been boarded up. As soon as I had turned around with my back facing the front door, it opened. I turned around and saw an Asian man in silk pajamas standing in the doorway. Behind him, there were more candles than I had ever seen illuminating the hallway. He just stared at us blankly for a moment and didn't say anything. I then nervously asked, excuse me, sir, can we go into your backyard really quick? My brother threw a harmonica over it, and we're trying to recover it. He didn't say anything. He just stared at us. A moment goes by, and I'm getting a little worried. Before I tell him not to worry about it, he said this.
I don't have a backyard.
I was confused. I could clearly see the gate. I told him this. He just said again blankly,
I don't have a backyard.
Both me and my friend are looking at each other confused, and then he says this.
Come inside. I have a backyard, but you can only see it through here. That's not my gate.
Okay, this was really strange. That was clearly his backyard gate. I wanted my harmonica back so bad, but something felt wrong about all this. My friend spoke up. Don't worry about it. Thank you. We're leaving. The man asked if we were sure and said that we should just come inside, sit down, and explain it properly to him, and then that maybe he could help us find the harmonica. When we refused again, the man went from calm to angry in a split second.
Fine, you won't get it back. Don't come back.
He then slammed his front door. I was freaked out. My friend and I backed away into the cul-de-sac. At this point, I'm about to give up. But my friend was more daring than I was at that age. He told me to come with him quickly. He quietly moved to the man's back gate and waited for me. He waved at me to come over. I hesitated, but knew we needed to act fast to get it back. So I moved to him. Okay, my friend said. We open it, run in, grab it, and then run home. A straightforward plan. I agreed. He opened the gate quickly, and I charged through it, but then was halted immediately by what I saw. It was a horrifying sight. The backyard was more than unkempt. There were blue plastic drums everywhere in the backyard with an awful smell. There were what appeared to be rags everywhere too, and a metal shack that had rusted. The grass had grown unbelievably tall along the fence line, and there would be no way to get the harmonica without a long search. We also noticed one of the house's windows to our right could see into the yard. My friend got low to the ground, turned to me and whispered, "Let's go." We began to crawl past the window. I then noticed an arm holding a knife in the window. I then heard yelling and movement from within the house. We both froze. Around the corner of the house was a deck with a back door. That door swung open, and then the man ran outside with a knife, staring at us angrily.
Get in the house,
He yelled.
I will call your parents from there. In the house. Sit on my couch. Get in the house. Get in the house.
My friend and I were horrified at the sight of the man in silk pajamas screaming at us bearing a knife. We got up and ran out of the yard. He chased us to the gate and slammed it shut. We ran into the cul-de-sac trying to catch our breath, and then his front door swung open. He began screaming at us more to get into his house. We were just about to run home, but then my mom's red minivan sped into the cul-de-sac. She rolled down her window and yelled at us angrily to get in. I turned back to the man's house and he slams his door shut. We get into the van with my mom, and she told us that that man was a registered sex offender and asked us what the hell we were doing. We told her what had happened. Nothing ever came of it though. After that day, my mom never let us leave the house when we were playing. I didn't see him after that day at all though. The man did move out about a year later. I always wonder what would have happened if I had listened to the man and gone into the house. As an adult, I wonder what was in those blue barrels, and would we have ended up in one of those if we had listened to the man and gone into the house?
Story 3.
One night, I went over to my parents' house to have dinner with them and to spend time together. I had recently moved out, so I took any opportunity I had to see them. I had my then girlfriend with me and had gone out to the backyard to have a cigarette with her after we had eaten. We laid down on the trampoline and began looking at the night sky together. The moon was covered by clouds for a time, but when they parted, the moonlight lit up the yard. I don't remember the exact conversation we were having, but I remember what I said right before we saw it. I said to her jokingly, "What if we see some aliens?" Well, I'm not sure if that's exactly what we saw, but it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Not 1 second after I said that, something caught my eye. It looked like the clouds in the sky to the left of the moon were shifting. It's hard to describe. I looked closer, squinting my eyes, and saw that what I was looking at was refraction, like when you stick a pencil into some water and it looks as if it's split. In that distortion, I saw the shape of a massive boomerang. It left the clouds and made its way in front of the moon. It was now a clearly visible shape passing overhead. I sat up quickly and asked my girlfriend if she was seeing what I was seeing. She said yes, quietly. Her eyes were fixed on this thing. I looked back up and it made its way past the front of the moon. It made a very faint, ominous noise. It was like a low hum. I'd never heard anything like it. There was also a faint green aura around it. All of a sudden, I had felt an intense dread come over me and felt like I was being stared at.
By a predator.
It was the feeling you get if someone is staring you down, like they're about to attack you. It was coming from that giant craft in the sky. Before another moment had the chance to pass, there was a flash of light, and it shot into the night sky at a speed I don't believe any man-made object is capable of. I ran inside to tell my parents. I was in disbelief, and of course, to this day, they do not believe me. I know what I saw, though.
Story 4.
I have always had trouble sleeping. I've never really cared for sleep anyways. I've always figured there was plenty of time for that when you pass on. After that night in the park though, I think I might have been wrong about that. That night was years ago. I was tossing and turning in bed as usual, having trouble sleeping. I had just gotten out of a relationship and it had ended in a bad way. This made sleeping more difficult. It kept me up thinking, wondering if things could have been different. Well, on that particular night, I was sick of thinking about it alone in bed and just got up. It was as if my body had taken over and said, "Nope, we're not doing this tonight," and started calling the shots for me. I put on my clothes and boots, grabbed my keys, and walked out of my apartment. I lived next to a park and figured I would just go and walk off my thoughts there. As I walked out my door, my next door neighbor came walking up the stairs to his apartment. He looked exhausted and a little drunk. I nodded to him in acknowledgement, and he nodded back. We never spoke to each other, but we had interactions like this occasionally. I walked down the steps and over to the park in the distance. The park had lighting around the perimeter, but it was pitch black past there. You weren't supposed to be in the park that late anyways. Regardless, I walked on the park's concrete path into the pitch black and felt the wind on my skin and listened to the trees moving with it. It was refreshing to be wrapped in the dark and quiet, with only the sound of the wind. It felt liberating. Eventually, my eyes had adjusted. The moonlight helped a bit, and I was able to see a small trail branching off the concrete path and leading into the trees. Impulsively, I walked onto it and into the trees. This wasn't normal for me. Sure, I enjoyed walking in the woods, but never deep in the woods alone at night. It was eerie. I walked the trail a little while and then noticed something interesting. There was a drop-off into a huge ditch with a bunch of tires and other junk littered around. Feeling a little adventurous, I said, "Screw it," and climbed down into it. I lost my footing though and fell backward, landing on my back. The fall wasn't too far, but it was enough to knock the wind out of me. I got up cursing and dusting myself off. I stood there for a while, collecting myself, thinking. I decided I'd lay down and look up at the night sky. But then, as I started to lay down, I heard the bushes above the ditch rustle loudly. I turned around toward the sound and it stopped abruptly. I felt a little uncomfortable, but thought it might have been a critter of some kind. I turned back around to lay down, but then the bushes shook again. This time faster. I shot straight up onto my feet and looked at them, shaking, trying to make out what was happening in the darkness. And then a man jumped out of the bushes down into the ditch. He landed on his feet and looked right at me, with no expression on his face. At this point, I thought I was about to get robbed or attacked or something, but I started to remind myself that people must go into parks after hours all the time. What were his reasons, though? I took a small step back and said to him, "Oh hey, I'm sorry. Is this your spot?" I thought maybe he was homeless and lived there, or maybe, I don't know. It's just what I said. He didn't speak for a while. He stood there, looking at me expressionless. He looked like a young guy. He had a plain red hoodie on and medium brown hair. He looked average in every way except there was an odd glow about him. It was like a faint purple or blue glow came off of him. His skin was very pale too. I chalked it up to the moonlight. He shot a stare at me that was very intense and asked,
How long have you been here?
I told him I had just gotten there and that I was just walking out. He was quiet again. I asked him his name. No response. I began to think of something I could say to make an exit, but then he said this.
I've been here a long time.
I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with the way he spoke and his lack of expression. It looked as if he wasn't even breathing. I responded to him. Oh yeah? How long? Again, he did not respond. Okay, I thought. This dude is a little off. Or maybe he's on something. It's time for me to leave. I turned toward the wall of the ditch to climb out and said to him, All right, man, have a good night. Again, nothing. I was starting to get a little annoyed with his quiet nature. I began to pull myself out of the ditch, but then I heard his feet smacking the ground. He was running at me. I panicked and fell back down into the ditch and landed on my back. I scrambled to get to my feet. As soon as I was up, I heard the bushes he had previously emerged from rustle around. What the hell? He wasn't next to me. He was gone. How the hell did he get back over to that side of the ditch, climb out, and run into the bushes that fast? I didn't wait around to think about it. Now, I'm freaked out. I climbed out of that ditch quickly and ran back into the woods the way I originally came. I stopped momentarily to listen for him and to make sure I wasn't being followed, but then I heard the craziest fit of laughter. I had heard people in my life who were under the influence of drugs or just nuts laugh similar to this before. This topped all of them. The laughing was coming from the direction of the ditch. I then heard feet smacking the ground of the forest. It was coming right toward me. I booked it. Fear got the better of me, and one slight turn to my left threw off all sense of direction. I'm really starting to slip up at this point, as this maniac is chasing me. I turned to look behind me while running. Stupid to do in the dark, I know, because then, while running as fast as I could, I slammed right into a tree and fell to the ground. I could tell the impact had hurt, but adrenaline masked the pain. I got up disoriented and just started running. As I was running, I began to hear what I can only describe as like an oohing sound from the man. Its direction didn't make any sense. It sounded like each one he made was zeroed in on me, growing louder and louder each time it came closer to me, and then restarting, and then coming closer to me again, over and over. It's not glamorous, but I started to yell. No, scream. I was actually screaming in terror. I'd never known what that had felt like. My mind felt like one huge alarm going off. I ran as fast as I could in the dark, bumping into what seemed like every goddamn tree there was. But then, finally, I saw one of the park's lights through the trees. That meant it had to be the perimeter. I was close to the edge of the forest and about to pass through the tree line when my feet suddenly gave out from under me. I fell forward, hitting the ground. As I did, I heard that crazy laughter again. I was terrified, but I was also getting furious at all of this. Flight had shifted to fight. Whoever this guy was, I was going to smack the shit out of him. I picked myself up and made it out into the park's field. A park light was maybe 50 yards away now. I turned to face the tree line though. I knew he was chasing me, so I thought I'd be ready to intercept him and use the little bit of energy I had left to take him. But there was no more laughter or the sound of his feet hitting the ground. It was quiet and the air felt still. That anger started to slowly wear off and go back to fear. I turned to make it back to the apartment and realized I had exited the forest on the other side of the park. I would have to walk all the way back through the park to make it back where I entered. As I'm trying to figure out what to do next, I noticed something. No, someone. It was him. The man in the red hoodie was standing under the park light and staring right at me. I don't know how he managed to get ahead of me. I should have seen him. Well, that anger I previously had was now gone. At that point, I felt like I was about to piss myself. Wait, what's that feeling around my crotch? Is that blood or... Nope. I had pissed myself. I called out to him. Just leave me alone, man. I'm f***ing leaving. Silence again. He was standing under the light staring at me. I was a mixed bag of all sorts of the worst kinds of emotions. I yelled, You, man. Leave me alone. I was surprised when I heard a response. Are you high? What the hell are you even doing? I realized that the person standing under the light wasn't even the man who was chasing me. It was just someone else who happened to be wearing a red hoodie. I couldn't quite make out his features. I just called back to him in response. I'm sorry. Nothing. He didn't say anything. I walked at an angle toward the park's exit to avoid him. At this point, my plan is to make it back to the road and figure out how to make it back to the apartment from there. There was no way in hell I was going to walk back through there. I was thinking how I'd never walk anywhere ever again, but boy, I sure would have a story to tell my friends when they were in town. We'd have a drink, and I'd share this with them, and they'd think it was so. The loudest and craziest scream I ever heard came from that man standing under the park light. He started to sprint toward me. I screamed and ran as fast as I could to make it out of the park. I couldn't see him, but he was getting closer, too close. I saw the sidewalk in the parking lot. I'd make my way out onto the street and flag someone down for help. The man was now right behind me with his crazy laughter and screams, his feet slamming on the ground as he got closer. I ran through the parking lot and out past the sidewalk and onto the street. I started shouting for help. There were no cars. I turned to prepare myself to be attacked by this man or this thing, but there was nothing there. It was hard to stand. I was trembling. I felt like my feet were going to give out from under me again. It suddenly occurred to me to check my pocket for my phone. I needed to call someone for help. It wasn't there. I had left it at the apartment. That was not uncommon for me, but damn, I would never make that mistake again if I survived this. I recognized the area, and the walk wouldn't be too far, but I was worried that that man or thing in the park would appear again. I did manage to walk home without an issue, though. I unlocked the door to my apartment and went into the bathroom. I took off my clothes to check for injuries and to get the piss-stained pants off. I was pretty badly bruised from hitting the tree and from falling into the ditch. I had cuts and scrapes as well. Other than that, I was okay. I'd left my dirty clothes on the bathroom floor. I'd deal with those tomorrow. I needed to sleep. I took a quick, hot shower and got into my bed. Then, something really strange happened. For the first time in a very long time, I fell right asleep with no issue. When morning came, I got up and went straight to the bathroom to retrieve my dirty clothes. They weren't there. While I was looking around for them, I noticed myself in the mirror. What the hell? I had no cuts or bruises. It must have been a crazy dream, I thought. I could remember every detail of that night, but everything was as I left it. My boots were even in the same spot. I was beyond confused. I couldn't shrug this off, though. That was too real to have been a dream, I thought. I put on some clothes and decided to go back to the park in the daylight to see if I could make sense of any of this. Maybe the layout wouldn't match, and then I'd have confirmation that this was just some crazy dream. I walked outside the apartment and locked my door. My neighbor's door opened, though. He yawned as he walked out with a key in hand and looked over at me. He shut his door and put a hand on his forehead. He looked miserable. He said to me, "Hey, sorry to bother you. Do you have any BC powder or ibuprofen?" I had seen him when I had left my apartment during the night, so I figured I would ask him if he saw me last night when he was coming up the stairs. If he didn't know what I was talking about, then I would know for a fact that this was some sort of crazy dream. I said to him, "Yeah, man, I have both." He replied, "Oh, thank you so much, dude. I had a bit too much last night." Before I went to grab him his medicine, I said, "Hey, this is going to sound strange, but I'm trying to figure something out. Did we see each other out here last night at like 3 in the morning?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, I think so. I was a little out of it, but I think I saw you walk out of your apartment when I got back." Sometimes fear can feel like ice in your veins when it's really bad. This was one of those times. What the hell was going on? I described to him what I was wearing, and he had confirmed it. I didn't tell him why I was asking, and I could tell he was eager to get the medicine from me, so I dropped it. When I went back into my apartment to get the medicine, I decided I would not be going back to the park that day or any day after that. Years have passed since then, and I've told my buddies. They all have their different conclusions as to what really happened, but I will never forget that experience. Something happened that night, but I can't make sense of it. The two conclusions are either I didn't leave the apartment and my neighbor was just too drunk to really remember if he saw me or not, or that I had left the apartment and been chased by 2 different people in red hoodies, and that my memory was just simply distorted from a lack of sleep. Maybe I didn't piss myself, although I do remember it vividly. Maybe I put my boots back, washed my clothes, dried them, and put them back while half asleep and just didn't remember it. It seems bizarre to think that's the case, but even considering that my experience was the true reality of the situation was much more bizarre, and honestly, terrifying. Something that's strange about it all is, since then, I have had no issue sleeping. I also make sure to take my phone with me every time I step outside the door. I do not walk in the woods alone, and being in the woods in general messes with me after that night. I'm just glad I'm okay. I was right about this though. That night does make for one hell of a story.
Story 5.
It was a Saturday night around 7:30 p.m. when my buddy texted me and asked if I would like to go to the gym with him. He was in incredible shape, and me? Well, not so much. He knew I had been wanting to make a change, but that I had been blowing off the gym recently due to work and school. I thought about my lack of commitment and, ready to recommit to getting in better shape, accepted. I told him I'd be there around 8 p.m. to pick him up. I got to his house a little later than that. I was in my early 20s and not very punctual, but I was eager to hit the gym with him. And he was also loose in his punctuality, so no big deal. I had parked directly out front of his house and honked my horn. On the other side of the street was a dense forest. I liked to gaze into the trees sometimes while I was waiting for him to come outside, so that's what I did while I waited. Some time goes by and he still hadn't come out. I called him, and he answered. He said that he would be out in a moment and that he was busy helping his parents with something. I decided to turn on the radio while I waited. Every station I put on, though, started to have really bad interference. It got so bad that I couldn't listen to any of the stations. I've had interference on a radio before, but not like that. Annoyed, I turned off the radio. I was tired from school and work, so I cut the engine, laid my head back, and just started to think with my eyes closed. But then, I heard a clap of thunder, and what sounded like a lightning bolt hitting the ground right next to me. It sounded like a massive explosion. There was no lightning, though. The sky was clear. There were no storms to have caused this. I had flinched when that sound had jolted me to my senses, but now I was curious. I rolled down the window and smelled the air for rain. I looked up, and the sky was indeed cloudless. Okay, that's weird, I thought, but I shrugged it off. A while longer goes by and I decide to call my friend again. I realize I've been waiting for half an hour since I last called him. He answered his phone and said, "Dude, I'm sorry, I'm coming out now." I said to him, "No problem, man. Family first." There was a pause, though, before he continued on the phone. I heard him breathing, but he wasn't saying anything. I said, "Hello?" He responded, "Dude, stop messing with me. Quit it." I was confused. I asked him what he was talking about. He said, "Okay, very funny. I'll admit you got me, but stop making that sound." "What sound?" I asked. "Dude, that's definitely you. For real, stop it," he said. I was a little annoyed and said, "No, man, it's really not. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about." The tone of his voice quickly turned from playful to concerned. He said, "Hold on a second, man. Don't hang up. You need to hear this." His front door opened and he ran outside. Finally, I thought. Now, what was this strange sound he said he was hearing? He ran up to the driver's side window and knocked on it. I rolled it down, and he quickly shoved his phone in my face with it on speaker. As soon as I heard it, my mind was flooded with fear. Let's take a quick pause from the story so that I can show you what he heard. I've worked with our submitter for days to get what you're about to hear completely accurate. I do warn you, though, what you are about to hear is disturbing. Take a listen. It sounded like a conversation of some kind. It would have been humorous if I wasn't so freaked out. I said to my friend, "Okay, man, quit it. You're the one that's messing with me." "I swear I'm not, man," he said. He now looked concerned too. He looked at me and said, "Tell you what, man, let's chill on the gym tonight." I shifted my focus to him instead of on the bizarre conversation on the phone. This made me a little angry considering I had just spent an entire hour getting there and waiting. "For real, man? I came out here to get you." He looked nervous and said, "Yeah, man, Both of our phones cut to black, and the strange conversation was gone. We both looked down at our phones. The screens were black, and the phones weren't responding. Then, I heard the conversation we were just listening to on our phones in the woods right next to the house. It grew louder, and one of the voices sounded like it was getting angrier. "Dude, what the f***?" my friend said. He started to back away from the car as he faced the forest. That sound got louder and louder, and then a red flash and a thunderous explosion sounded in the woods. My friend took off into the house. I tried to start my car. It wouldn't start. What the hell was going on? I got out and ran to his house. He held the door open for me, and we ran inside together. His parents asked us what that sound was and what we were doing out there. We told them what had happened, and the dad kept peeking out the windows. "You boys stay put for a while," he said. About an hour goes by, and we are looking through the windows trying to see what's happening. Nothing was happening. I decided I needed to head home, but was too scared to go outside. I also didn't know if my car would start. Maybe it needed a jump. After a while, I opened the front door and ran to my car. I get in and immediately try to start it. The car started up without an issue. Okay, I thought, let's get out of here ASAP. My window was still down from earlier. Right before I pulled out, I heard the strange conversation again and a loud bang, but this time, it was further into the woods. My body was flooded with an adrenaline dump that squeezed my back intensely. If you've ever experienced that, you know what I'm talking about. I sped off as fast as I could. I called my friend to let him know what had happened, but he didn't answer. The next day I did reach him, but he just kind of shrugged it off. That was the kind of guy he was anyway. It didn't seem to bother him the way it bothered me. Anytime we would see our other friends, we would tell them what had happened. No one can really explain it in a way that makes sense, but we do like to laugh about it.
Story 6.
I was driving to Arkansas for a family reunion one night. I was a delivery driver at an understaffed pizza restaurant during this time, so it was near impossible to get any time off. That meant I had to work from morning until the evening, and then I'd be able to leave. It was never my intention to be making this trip so late. Anyways, I was driving out in the middle of nowhere. I was more than uncomfortable doing so, but there was no way back at this point, and I needed to be there for my family. I had never met this side of my family before, and it was really important to my dad. The reason I was so uncomfortable doing this is I've been known to fall asleep behind the wheel. No matter how hard I try to fight it, I always start to nod off if I'm tired. This meant for long trips, I'd have to pull over and sleep on the side of the road. But this time, I was on a time crunch, so there was no time to nap. I did not want to do this in the middle of the night either, so I was pinching myself to stay awake, blasting the air, rolling down the windows, and playing the radio loudly. Despite all of that, I was still catching myself getting close to nodding off. I finally came across a truck stop and decided to stop and get myself a coffee. I filled up my tank, got some cold waters, and a nice hot coffee to keep me awake. I still had hours on the road and expected to arrive somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning. I'd get to the hotel, sleep for 4 hours or so, and go to this reunion. After I finished my coffee, I was wired. I had a lot of energy, but was also kind of anxious. I don't know how much caffeine was in that thing, but it must have been a lot. I also was really thirsty for water after drinking it, so I cracked open one of my waters and chugged it. I knew I'd need to pee at some point on the way after drinking all of that, but there would certainly be a truck stop on the way, I thought. Well, an hour goes by, and there wasn't one. At this point, I couldn't hold it any longer, so I just looked for a place that would be okay to pull over. It was pitch black, and no one was out, so I wasn't worried about concealment as much as I was nervous about just getting out of the car in the middle of the night alone. I eventually came across an area that had a gravel lot and a collapsed building. I don't know what it had used to be, but at this point in time, it was a ruin. I decided to stop there. I got out and thought I saw some flashing lights down the road. Worried it might be a cop, and not wanting an indecent exposure charge, I walked away from my car and behind the ruined building. I finally relieved myself behind the building and was sure after this I would be able to make it the rest of the way without needing to stop. But then, I heard a twig snap right behind me. I turned around, and not even 15 feet away from me in the brush, there was a really tall man in a gray hoodie. He was looking right at me. At least I assumed so. I couldn't see his face. His gray hood was wrapped around shadow. The way his legs moved was strange too. He looked as if every cautious step he took towards me also had him rocking backward a little bit before taking his next step. I didn't say a word. I zipped up my pants and turned to face him. I waited for him to speak. He kept taking those small, cautious steps toward me. Every time I tried to look at his face, I felt an impulse to look away. It was as if looking at his face was dangerous for some reason. I finally spoke. I'm leaving. That's all I could manage to say. He didn't even react. He just kept taking those strange, cautious steps toward me. I turned toward the car and started walking quickly. I kept him in my peripheral vision though. Something was not right about this. I then heard what sounded like 2 clicks coming from the man. I'm not sure what that clicking sound was, but it made my heart sink. As I got to my car, I turned back around to completely face the man. He wasn't there. He had only left my sight for a moment. Where was he? I began to open my car door and noticed that he was standing on the road. The moonlight made it a little easier to see him. I saw hands, a gray hoodie, and jeans, but I didn't see a face. He stood there on the road, menacingly. I got in the car quickly and started it up. I backed up and turned the car around to drive onto the road. I go to the right and avoid hitting him. As I started to pull to the right, this man, or this thing, let out a loud shriek and started sprinting toward the car. I put my foot all the way down on the gas and sped off down the road. My heart was pounding, and I was freaked out. Maybe 10 minutes had passed and I was speeding down the road. I wanted to put as much distance between me and him as possible. I kept checking my rearview mirror, as if he would be behind me. And of course, there was nothing there. But then, in front of me, way down the road, I could just barely make out the shape of something tall. My heart started to race. I kept on speeding forward. Whatever it was, I would go in the oncoming lane and drive around it. I had my brights on as I approached, and I saw what it was. It was the man in the gray hoodie. In that brief moment, I could see all of his features. His skin did not look right. It looked wrinkled and decayed. Even with all the light from my headlights illuminating him, one thing hadn't changed. He did not have a face. There was only darkness where my light should have revealed a face. I moved to the other lane and drove past him. As I did, it let out another chilling shriek. I did over 100 miles the rest of the way to the hotel, at least until I started seeing other cars and buildings again. That whole time between then, I was worried I would see that thing on the road again, but fortunately, I didn't. There was a little while on the road while I was speeding that I had tried to turn on the radio, but it was all static. But I think that was just a bad signal. Still, it did not make me feel any better. I have no idea what that thing was, but that was no man. With the way it was able to get around so quickly, I don't know how I got out of there. But one thing I do know is that I should have never left that car. I'll never drive out in the sticks alone at night ever again. I've heard of people seeing stuff like this before. Well, now I've seen it too. Be careful when you travel. There's stuff out there that we don't understand.
Story 7.
One night, me and my friend were at Six Flags, riding as many rides as we could. I'd always been interested in roller coasters, not just with riding them, but how they were engineered. My dad and I would travel all around the country, checking out different amusement parks and riding everything we could, with Cedar Point being our favorite. Anyways, my friend and I were heading over to the Gotham section of the park to ride Mr. Freeze and the Batman. As we were making our way there though, something caught my eye and my peripheral vision. I looked into the sky and I saw it. It was a giant boomerang object that seemed as if it was reflecting everything around it. It wasn't quite invisible. It was like a mirror. It made no sound. Maybe a faint hum if anything. It was just gliding over us in the sky so smoothly. I had never seen anything move so smooth and effortlessly, especially something of that size. I tapped my friend's shoulder and told him to look up. He saw it too. "It's probably just some military bullshit," he said, and then we continued on our way, forgetting all about it. As time has passed, that memory has stuck with me though. What the hell was that thing?
Story 8.
My friend's family was going out of town on vacation for a week and offered me some money to watch their house. I was allowed everything in the kitchen and to just make myself as cozy as possible while I was there. I was in the middle of reading a few books and thought it would be easy money to just relax and read. They took their dogs with them too, so my responsibilities were simple. Get the mail, feed their 2 cats, and make sure no one robbed the place. Easy. My friend's dad was a little bit of a paranoid guy. He was proficient with firearms, and so was I. We would go shooting together. So he told me the key to his safe if I needed access to a weapon in case of a break-in. I had gotten my license to carry though, and kept a Gen 3 Glock 19 with me everywhere I went. So him giving me the code to the safe was really just a showing of trust, and not really something he believed I would need. At least, that's how I saw it. Firearms would do nothing against what I faced that week though. My first night there was peaceful. I fed the cats, put on Peter Jackson's King Kong on the TV, and kept the volume down as I read on their comfy couch in the living room. I felt like I was in heaven. I had previously worked a really hard job at a warehouse. It was seasonal work, but it was hard on the body. They let me go at the end of that season, and now I was getting paid pretty good money to just kick back and recover. The second night is where things started to get weird. I had just finished taking a shower when I heard a door slam shut downstairs. Naked, I grabbed my Glock and quickly made my way down the steps to investigate, and looked into the kitchen. The 2 cats were staring at the pantry door. Those little shits must have slammed it shut, I thought. I turned around to head back upstairs and to finish drying off, and then heard the pantry door behind me open, slowly. I stood still for a moment on the stairs and turned around to look. The pantry door was wide open, and the cats were looking at it intently. I was a little creeped out, but just put it out of my mind and continued on upstairs. Once I was back in the bathroom to continue drying off though, I heard a loud bang. Someone must be in the house, I thought. I threw on my clothes and went down to investigate. I had my Glock out and aimed down into the kitchen. I worked my way down the stairs. "Who's there?" I called out. No response. I could see into the master bedroom from the stairs. The entrance to it was in the kitchen. My friend's family had left a lamp on in there, and I had left it alone as I didn't want to enter their bedroom unless it was absolutely necessary. The lamp shut off and the room went black. That really creeped me out. I cleared the house. No one was in it. I decided there must be an explanation for everything that had just happened, and that I was just freaking myself out being alone. I went back upstairs, and I managed to sleep. The third day was normal, and I was settling into a routine of feeding the cats, bringing in the mail, using the home gym in the garage, and reading on the couch in the living room, with a comforting movie on. That third night though, things went from 0 to 100 really fast. I was on the couch reading after dinner when one of the cats had jumped onto my stomach. I pet the little guy. He was cute, but he kept bumping his head into my hand while I was trying to read. He was purring loudly. I accepted defeat and dropped my book, and loved on him. It was a peaceful moment, but it didn't last long. A potted plant in the front of the house that sat on a small table fell to the ground and shattered. I quickly sat up and the cat jumped off of me. I investigated to see if maybe the other cat had knocked it over, but there was no sign of her. I turned around to get to the broom. I started to feel a little worried, not at how strange it was that the pot had randomly fell, but that I might upset the family as the mother really loved her little potted plants. She had them all over the place. Hell, she probably had this one too close to the table, and it finally fell off, I thought, as I swept up the mess. But then the other cat ran down the stairs chasing something I couldn't see. It was frantically trying to catch it. I followed the cat's eyes, seeing what it was looking at. She stopped just below a giant family portrait that hung in the dining room in the front of the house. She stared at it intensely. The portrait fell from the wall and hit the ground hard. The glass in the frame shattered, and the frame itself came apart. The cat jumped back and the other ran over quickly. They both started to hiss at something in the corner. Nothing was there. They growled, hissed, and spit, and then ran away, hiding under the couch. Something dangerous. This is something dangerous, I thought. I took the broom in my hands and held it as a weapon, as if that would do anything. Hey, who's there? Is someone here? I shouted. No response. I heard the cats hiss again, and then a light bulb in one of the lamps in the living room popped. At this point, I knew that this was something unnatural. I had never been superstitious. To be honest, I never really even thought about it, but I sure was thinking about it now. I didn't know what to do. My heart started pounding, and my breathing quickened. Before I could formulate a plan, the pantry door swung open and slammed shut. I jumped. I felt as if I had jumped out of my own skin when I did. Not knowing what else to do, I tried to reason with this thing. Hey, I mean no harm. I'm here to keep this place safe. I mean no harm. I'm friendly. I'm a friend of the family. The house was quiet. The air was still. But then the TV shut off. Okay, I'm going to get the cats and get the hell out of here, I thought. The problem was they were under the couch and scared. I'm not the strongest guy in the world, but I figured I would lift the couch and throw it upside down to get them quickly and leave. Maybe it wasn't the best plan, but I was terrified. I flipped the couch and grabbed one of the cats. The other one ran out from under the couch and ran up the stairs. The cat shifted its center of mass and was heavy as I tried to pick it up from the carpet. Come on, let's go. I'm trying to calm the little guy down, but then another pot at the front of the house falls. Then there was a loud bang upstairs. The other cat came running back down the stairs and then stopped and looked back up it. The family had a row of pictures in the hallway upstairs. I could see the edge of them from where I was standing at. They started to fall one by one, each landing with a menacing impact. I pulled the boy cat up close to my chest and chased the other one into the pitch-black master bedroom, into the walk-in closet. She tried to get under a pile of laundry that was in there, but I grabbed her and pulled her to my chest. Both cats were scared and were trying to free themselves from me while I was tripping over everything in that damn closet in the dark. I exited the closet with both cats in my arms. I heard a loud bang behind me in there, but didn't stick around to find out what it was. I felt like whatever this thing was playing with me. I did not like thinking about that one bit, though. I needed to get my keys, but they were upstairs where the pictures were falling off the hallway wall. I'm petrified at this point, but I'm in action. I was able to act under pressure, but I definitely did not keep a cool head. I put the cats in the small bathroom next to the stairs to keep them together. I ran upstairs, and what I saw still messes with me when I think about it. Every single picture frame in that goddamn hall had fallen. I didn't waste any time. I ran over those pictures, feeling the glass crack under my shoes, and ran into the bedroom. I quickly rounded up my belongings, made my way downstairs, got the cats, and ran out the door. I stayed the rest of the week at my place. I had gotten food for the cats and a cheap litter box. I called the family the day that they were supposed to come back and told them what had happened. They were confused and upset with me. I met them at their house and walked them through everything that had happened. They were visibly upset, and my friend asked if I had people over. I just kept telling them what happened. The dad paid me and told me to leave. After that day, my friend reached out less and less, and I eventually stopped seeing them altogether. The parents never treated me the same after that either, and that night cost me my relationship with them. I don't blame them. One thing is certain in my life from now on, though. I will never house sit again.
Story 9.
I was standing outside of my home with my brother and friend after seeing a movie. We were talking for a bit and would soon say our goodbyes to each other. My friend was a smoker, and he wanted to have a smoke before he left, so we joined him. It had been a long week at work, and I was very tired, so I laid down on the driveway and began to look up into the sky. I don't remember what we were talking about, but the conversation shifted to how small we were in relation to the universe. You know, the kind of existential stuff you talk about in your 20s. I could just barely make out the stars, but as my eyes adjusted, I began to count them. I knew it would be impossible to count them all, but I just started doing it for some reason. I fixated on one star for a while and got lost in thought. Suddenly,
It moved.
I don't mean a little bit. This thing shot a distance we can't even comprehend. This was not a plane with its blinking lights, or a satellite which can resemble a star at times, but moves at a steady speed over the Earth. This was a star. Not only did it shoot off in one direction, but several. I shouted at my brother and friend to look at this. They spotted it shooting around immediately. We were all nervously laughing and joking, but eventually we just fell silent in awe of this thing. It began rotating in circles and moving sporadically. Then, it shot all the way across the night sky and disappeared. Its motion was unnatural, and to this day, I have not seen anything like that. We all just kind of accepted what we saw. I mean, what can you really do about it? You can tell people, but they will just assume you're lying, or that you saw something else. People are quick to dismiss things that they believe are strange or unbelievable. I don't know. It was strange to say the least.
Story 10.
When I was 19, I would use every opportunity I had to see my then girlfriend. I had always thought that one day I'd marry her. That was over a decade ago, and things didn't quite pan out like that. In fact, that ended in the worst way possible. Life seems to do that. There was one summer, though, where she was at my house as much as she could be. We'd watch movies, talk, and we're just inseparable. That's just how it is when you're that young, and you think you're in love. There was something about her, though. She was off. I've come to realize over the years that the person I was with was never the person I thought she was. She would mold her personality to match mine, but there never seemed to be anything beneath the surface now that I think of it looking back. Something she did, that I thought was amusing then, was practice witchcraft. Now, I didn't get to see how any of this stuff worked, as she was always reluctant to share that part of herself with me. You know, I was a young guy and thought that kind of stuff was cool. I didn't really think about it. The times we weren't together, we'd call each other, and I remember there being long pauses with me asking her what she was doing. She would seem distracted. Sometimes I'd hear something break, or an impact, and then she would get angry. I didn't really know what that was about, but again, I was a dumb kid. I remember hearing her talk to someone, and always figured it was her parents, but now I'm not so sure. I'm pretty sure whoever, or whatever, she used to talk to, was what I heard one night. This night was in the middle of the summer. Her parents were out of town, and she had to watch the house and take care of their dogs. She invited me over to stay with her. I didn't spend nearly as much time over there as at my home with her, but figured it would be relatively similar to staying at my house. I was wrong about that. That night in particular, she would get upset constantly about strange things, and she seemed to fall asleep abruptly and wake back up a lot. Looking back, maybe it was drugs. I honestly don't know. But that night, it really made me uncomfortable. I was in the middle of playing a new computer game called Shogun 2 Total War, and I was telling her all about it in great detail, probably too much detail. I was really excited about that game, and while I was explaining it to her, she just snapped at me about how uninteresting it was, and then said she was heading to her bed. It was maybe 8 p.m. at that point. That was really unusual for us. We'd normally stay up really late. Also, she was normally a lot nicer. I told her I was sorry for talking her ear off about something she was uninterested in, and told her good night. I then stayed downstairs with the dogs and watched TV. I woke up in the living room at 2 in the morning. It was completely dark, and I couldn't see a thing. I guess the TV had turned itself off. I felt around for my phone to have some light. Once I got it on, I saw all the dogs laying completely still, asleep. They were old, fat, and lazy things. I got up and stepped lightly past them, and then proceeded to make my way upstairs to my girlfriend's room. The whole house was completely dark, but using my phone light, I found her room down the hall upstairs and laid down next to her. She was dead asleep. I laid there thinking, asking myself why she was acting so weird. Maybe I had done something and she was upset. She then said something in her sleep. It was indecipherable, but then she said it again. I said, "What, baby?" and leaned my head in closer to hear what she said. Her eyes shot open, and she didn't acknowledge me. She stared at the wall she was facing. She wasn't even staring at the wall, really. She was looking way past it, somewhere far off in the distance. Her eyes were somewhere else. She said something again, this time louder, but again I could not figure out what the hell it was. She shut her eyes, and it was as if she had been asleep the whole time. My back was a little tense. I had sat up to listen to her, but now I was going to lay back down and shrug it off. But then, it happened. Right above me in the ceiling, there were 3 loud bangs. I was a little tired, and it would have been easy to fall asleep, but now I was wide awake and concerned. I shook my girlfriend's arm and tried to wake her up. Baby, do you hear that?" She didn't wake up. I sat up staring at the ceiling. What the hell was that? I then heard something downstairs. It sounded like a loud and low rumble. That sound I had immediately assumed was the dogs. But I was nervous now and got up to investigate. I made my way downstairs. Nope. All of the dogs were laying where they were when I had gone up to lay down. Also, they were really still. Why hadn't that sound woken them up? I thought. I was creeped out, so I made my way back upstairs and laid down next to my girlfriend. Again, in the ceiling. I got up and froze. I didn't know what to do, really. I walked out into the hall and looked up. The entrance to the attic was located there. I was scared, but I grabbed the string to the attic and slowly brought the ladder down to enter it. That thing sounded like something from a horror movie when you opened it, and looking up into the blackness of the attic made me feel as if I was consumed by something cold and evil. That sounds dramatic, I know, but that's how it felt. Whatever this thing was, though, it had to be in the attic. As soon as I had the ladder down in the hall, I took a deep breath and started to climb up. I had my phone light out, and I was going to figure out what was going on. The air conditioner in the house had shut off while I was climbing, making things dead silent. Every step up that ladder I took brought more fear into my heart. Just before I could peek my head inside the attic to see what was causing the sound, I started to lose my footing. I gripped the ladder tightly, and a shot of adrenaline went through me. I continued moving upward to see what was up there, but then I heard someone running up the stairs. I looked down toward the stairs. They were around the corner, so I couldn't see what it was. My mind was split between proceeding upward, freezing, and jumping down to quickly intercept whatever was coming up the stairs. This all happened in the blink of an eye, and because I couldn't come to certainty on any one of those decisions, I just fell backwards off the ladder. Fear had gotten the better of me. I landed on the floor and quickly scrambled to get up. I squeezed past the ladder and turned around the corner. Nothing was there. I peeked down and saw the dogs were still sound asleep. Right above my head, I heard it again. I had accepted that I was not going up there now. I had lost all of my courage. I quickly brought the attic door back up to the ceiling. It slammed shut, and now I'm no longer hearing those intense banging sounds from the attic, but instead, hearing what sounds like heavy footsteps walking around casually up there. I'm facing the ceiling, tracing the steps slowly, making my way back to my girlfriend's bedroom. I suddenly realized the steps were following my path. I stepped backward into my girlfriend's bedroom, and it continued. I sat in the bed, and the footsteps continued until they were right over my girlfriend. I'm about to turn and tell her we need to call the police and leave, but she shot straight up and turned her head to me. She looked at me like she wanted to kill me. She quickly laid back down and was asleep again. I don't know why, but her doing that had changed my mind about being so quick to leave. I just laid down next to her, wrapped my arms around her tightly, and somehow managed to fall asleep immediately. I woke up that morning with everything still fresh in my mind. In my sleep, I had turned to face away from my girlfriend. Now that I was awake, I turned over quickly to tell her what had happened, but she wasn't there. I got up and went downstairs. She wasn't there either. I went back upstairs to look around and see where she was. I found her in her parents' bedroom asleep on the floor. I woke her up and told her everything that had happened. She seemed more like her usual self. All she did was say that she was sorry. I was confused and stated again everything that had happened. She told me that the house does that sometimes and not to worry about it. What? She said it was a spirit, but that it was friendly. What the hell was going on? I had previously thought her witchcraft stuff was just some cool and novel aspect of her, but in that moment, a whole new world had opened to me. Was I crazy? Were we both crazy? As the years went on, strange things would happen with her, where she would stop talking to me for days at a time. She would even wander into the woods and stay there for days. I could continue on about that and how it led to us splitting up, but that's a much uglier and horrifying story to me, and I don't wish to share that. Since then, I'm split between if that all really happened or if my mind was playing tricks on me. I honestly don't know, and the years have a way of making things harder to be certain of.
Thanks for watching.
If you have a story you want to share, please email me at 818stories@gmail.com. Something I've noticed with previous submissions is a concern that your story is not well written enough, or that it's not scary enough to share for a video. I say that's absolute nonsense. We want to hear your stories. I just need the details of what happened, and then I'll write a script, and then I'll use it in a future video. So if that's holding you back, don't let it. Shoot me an email. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking around. Please remember to like this video, as it helps this channel tremendously. Stay safe and vigilant out there.
It's a dangerous world.
Please like, comment, and subscribe.